What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. Matt is going to be joining me in just a moment to break down the NBA draft, which is going on live during this podcast. It's about 8:30 here on June 26th, which means the draft just started. We just saw the first couple picks, and the draft will be going on while we're recording. So you're going to get some live reactions to maybe the first like 8, 9, 10 picks of this draft. We're also going to talk about all the other goings-ons in the NBA, the Knicks trading for Noodles Bridges earlier today, and then re-signing OG Anunoby, trying to make a run at Boston next year in the East. Malik Monk just re-signed with the Kings. Caruso's been traded for Giddey. We just started the offseason. It's already kicking into high gear. There's been some big moves that we're going to talk about, along with a few other things. So just some fun NBA offseason stuff while we live react to the draft. Before we get started, just a reminder, you can reach out to us, fouledoutsports@gmail.com. Really appreciate you guys listening. We would love to hear from you. Let us know how you feel about your team's NBA draft. You know, it's a weak draft, but we're going to talk about some guys on this podcast that we like and guys that we don't like, including the first couple of picks here who I'm not a huge fan of. So make sure you reach out to us. We'd really love to hear from you guys. But for now, let's go grab Matt and let's talk NBA offseason. Let's go. Matt is here about 4 picks deep into the NBA draft. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing all right.
We started the podcast about a half hour later than we normally do so that we could get a couple picks under our belts before we started talking. And now we're starting the podcast just as Matt's favorite team, the Detroit Pistons, are on the clock. Matt, what do you want to see the Pistons do here?
Ideally, move back. Really not any players in this draft where I'm like, I gotta have them. So, I mean, if they can get someone that they see use in and also pick up future draft capital, that would be preferable.
I feel like future draft capital is a premium in this draft because there aren't a lot of guys that are rated that high. So there's not a ton of guys that people really want to move around for. Like you said, there's not like that, oh, I gotta have this guy.
No, but there's one guy that you've talked about that, you know, we could see someone putting a premium on coming up for in Klingon.
I was just gonna say, I actually kind of, if you guys are gonna stay here and use this pick, I would like to see you take Klingon.
Yeah.
It was interesting leading up to the draft, like the last week since we talked, the odds had really shifted to the point where it was either going to be Zachary Risachet or Donovan Klingon for the number 1 overall pick for the Hawks.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh man, I really like that they're thinking about Klingon. I think that's a smart move because in a draft that's so full of uncertainty like this one, where, you know, we've talked about this ad nauseum on this podcast, that it's not a good draft. There's not a lot of upside. I'd like getting a guy in Klingon who I know he's going to be able to contribute, where these other guys that are in the top 5, 6, 7 picks here are huge question marks. Mm-hmm. The Hawks do end up going with Risachet, making him the first pick in the draft. I was thinking about this leading up to the draft, and I want to get your opinion. Do you think that, like, as a GM, you come into this draft and it's like, okay, there's not a ton of upside, but there's a few guys who are project guys from overseas who have some upside. My point of view is like, I would like to get someone like Klingon who I know is going to be able to contribute and be at least a role player on my team. Maybe not an all-star, but like a good guy that I can count on. But do you think there's pressure on the GMs to be like, okay, if I take the safe guy and one of these guys explodes, I'm going to look like a fucking idiot for not taking them first overall? Where if you take a swing and you miss in this draft, it's just like, yeah, that draft wasn't very good anyway. So like, there's not as much downside for you as a GM.
It's a situation where, yeah, if you have a guy that you like honestly really believe is like has that difference maker level of potential, you still take them. I think there are very few people who actually believe that those guys are in this draft. And so if you don't have those guys there, I just think that you take a guy who you kind of know who he is and make sure that it's a fit for what your team needs and just be happy with having a contributor adding depth to your team because the last thing you want to do is come out of a draft with absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just think if you're going to come out of a draft with nothing, that this is the draft to do it in. And you just go to your owner and be like, look, man, there's these overseas guys. I took a huge swing just in case and it didn't work out. But it's not like if you miss on Risachet as the number one pick that Klingon is going to be like the next Anthony Davis or something. And like you
Yeah.
missed a all NBA player. It's like you're going to miss a role player.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not as much downside for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like the people that were kind of trying to talk Anthony Edwards out of being the number one pick,
Yeah.
right? Like
I was
there
just
was
thinking
maybe a
it's
little bit of doubt that year, but in like retrospect now, oh man, did that look dumb.
I was just thinking it's not like taking Fultz and passing on like Tatum or like De'Aaron Fox even.
Yeah.
It's like you're taking Fultz and it's like, I got the upside. And it's like, okay, I missed on Brooke Lopez, but I took a swing for the upside. Also, like,
Yeah.
what is going on with basketball in France right now? Like, we get Wembanyama last year, and then the top two picks in this draft are both French, and Risachet, and then the Wizards go with Sarr number 2 overall. Did Rudy Gobert like inspire a generation of guys to pick up basketballs over there?
God, that would be a really well, unless it was, oh my God, look what he's doing in the playoffs every year. We have to do better.
We can't let him embarrass our country like this. That's a good point. I was thinking,
Yeah.
like, what's funny is they never talk to a French guy, and the French guy is like, oh, my hero is Rudy Gobert. He's the best French player ever. The French guys are like, yeah, man, fuck Rudy Gobert. I grew up watching Tony Parker. That was pretty cool. But I'm like a really big fan of like Nikola Jokic or Shaq or like something like that. Like
Yeah.
all the American guys inspire them. It's not like their fellow countrymen encourage them, unless it's exactly like you said, where they're just like, this guy's embarrassing our country. We have to show them that we're better than this. But I don't know if this class is the one that's really going to back that up. So Risachet, number 1 to the Hawks. Sarr goes number 2 to the Wizards, which, like, looking at the odds coming into the draft tonight, it was like negative 10,000 that it was going to be Risachet and then Sarr. Oh, Pistons, Ron Holland.
Okay.
All right, Ron. This is kind of the thing. It's like we're now in the part of the draft where it's like, I don't know what's going to happen, but Ron Holland, G League guy. I'm looking at his page on Tankathon right now because Tankathon will come and tell us exactly what we should be thinking. We were just talking about the G League guys, so like this, like I said, the draft has been going kind of according to the odds so far, where it was Risachet, Sarr, Reed Shepherd goes 3 to Houston, which we can talk about in a minute. But with the 5th pick, actually, Matas Buzelis was plus 125 to go to the Pistons. And I was just telling you before we started recording that, like, I don't like Buzelis. He's 100% the type of prospect that I don't like because he has all these like athletic qualities, but doesn't have like the refined like skill. It's like, okay, what is this guy good at? And it's like, I don't really know. He might be good at, he's like okay at some stuff, but he's not really good at anything. Like he's kind of all B minuses, right?
Yep.
And like
Yeah.
the G League thing scares me a little bit, like I say that to say like Buzelis was in the G League with Ron Holland this year. And the G League thing just worries me because like who has come from the G League and been successful so far?
Someone's got to do it in order for anyone to believe it, and it doesn't really seem like that's going to happen now because it's going to get shut down.
The
So,
team sucks so bad this year that they're like, this project has failed. But I mean, like, it's been Jalen Green, Jonathan Kuminga. Last year it was Scoot Henderson was the big guy. Now we got
mhm.
Holland and Buzelis coming in amongst other. Oh, they're showing the highest drafted G League guys. Dyson Daniels is the other one. Like Jalen Green is good. He's had some
Yeah,
really good games. You know, Scoot Henderson, we'll see. We both liked him coming into the draft, but bad first
yeah,
year on a bad Portland team.
yeah. I mean, in general, the situation on that Portland team, I think, was unfavorable. So maybe a new year, fresh start. Maybe it's a little different, but yeah, not ideal.
Yeah. So, but I mean, for the Pistons, though, you guys need wings
Yep.
for sure. So taking a chance here on a guy who's, it says 6'7.75. So I'm going to round up and say that he's 6'8"
Yeah, but
with a
he's
6'11" wingspan.
yep. Yeah, which I mean that's vital.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to knock a guy just because he went to the G League, but I'm just saying, like, anybody that comes from like G League or like OTE are these quote unquote non traditional lanes to the NBA. You know, like I look at Sar, someone that played in Australia, and look at the other guys who have like played in Australia, and it's like, okay, like we have LaMelo Ball, but like it's not like Australia. You know, there's LaMelo Ball, there's Giddey, but it's not like Australia has been like a powerhouse of like turning guys out.
Yep. This year's draft, it really is more than any other year, just tossing darts at a dartboard and you're just hoping for the best.
Yeah, I kind of was thinking about Reed Shepard, who went third to Houston. Seems like an extremely Houston pick. Is that like he is good enough on defense, but he is going to get hunted in the NBA. But like, I kind of like the fact that he has something that you can rely on because he has a flamethrower 3-point shot. You know, and it's like I was saying earlier with Klingon, you're taking a guy who you at least know has something.
Yep.
And I know he didn't show up in the Oakland game, and that's still like weighing heavy on my mind. Is like, okay, you were getting guarded by Jack Golke, and you took 3 shots the entire game. Still really bothers me with him. But if he's like a role player who's just going to hit spot up threes, you know, that's a good spot for him. I also think Houston's a super weird team now. All of a sudden, make a trade yesterday to get Phoenix's pick back, and like they kind of swap some picks with the Nets after the Nets make a big move that we'll talk about here in a little bit. And all of a sudden, there's rumors today that they're going to go into win now mode. Like this Houston team that's sucked ass for years now is all of a sudden in win now mode, and that they're going to try to make a deal for Kevin Durant and possibly Jimmy Butler to go with Kevin Durant. And they're an interesting swing team this offseason because they have a shitload of assets.
They do.
They have a lot of picks. They have a lot of young guys they can trade, but the one that was thrown out today that I sent you is that they could potentially take Alperen Şengün and put him on the table for Kevin Durant. I know you want to win games, but we were talking earlier about Şengün is like what 22, 23 years old,
Yep.
and they're saying he's basically going to be like Sabonis 2.0, and he was fucking awesome last year until he tore his ACL. And you want to give away a 22-year-old who's that good to get like 2 or 3 years of Kevin Durant, who's 36 years old and has had torn his Achilles and like not been particularly amazing with the Suns. Like we're not talking about trading for prime KD here.
Yeah, they need some experience and they need a number one on that team, but just getting KD, I don't think that makes you a legitimate contender. You go out and get KD and Jimmy Butler, at that point, you are emptying the clip to get those two guys. So, what do you have left? Like, yes, you've got all the picks, but you're going to have to give up some players too. And it's not just going to be Şengün. So, that, I mean, at that point, you're looking at not a whole lot of depth for a couple of guys that their legs are not as spry as they once were. You
I
can't just run them out there for 40 to 48 minutes.
was kind of shocked to even see Shengun's name in a trade rumor. He was 21, 9, and 5 last year
Yeah.
with a 22 PER before he got hurt. Like he's really fucking good and he's really young. He's 21 years old to be 22 next season. I'm like, you want to give that away to be a playoff team in a West that's absolutely loaded? Like you want to give away Shengun to have a first round exit is basically what we're getting at. Because I don't think that if they trade for Durant, they're going to be better than the Suns with like Booker
No.
and all these guys. But because it's going to be like Fred Van Vliet, Dylan Brooks, Kevin Durant, Jimmy Butler. I don't know, maybe like who's still there because they have all these young guys. Like
Yeah.
They have Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, Amin Thompson, Shengun, Easton, and Whitmore. And I'm assuming, if Shengun's going in the Durant deal, some of those other guys are probably going in the Jimmy deal.
The thing there too about like moving on from Shengun is, well, with what he did last year, he's like pretty much right in line with what Jokic was doing at year 3 in the NBA. A little
Okay.
less rebounds, a little less assists, more points. Like, not, you know, Jokic is Jokic, not saying he's going to transcend to that level of player, but
No,
not
but
totally dissimilar play styles. And like the guy is still developing.
yeah, if you told me like we have a 21-year-old who's going to be Sabonis,
Yeah.
I'd be like, dude, I'm not trading that guy. Sabonis is awesome. He's on my team. I love Sabonis. We just the Hornets just picked Tidjane Sulan. This is the third French guy to go in 7 picks, Matt. What the fuck is going on? The French are taking over the NBA.
It's a French Revolution
One thing that we did not
in
consider about the
America.
Rockets is that their starting lineup would include Jimmy Butler and Steven Adams potentially next year. And
Yeah.
I know that any team that has Steven Adams is an automatic contender for you and Clint.
Hell yeah.
So, speaking of potential contenders, the other big news, and I really appreciate them doing this before we did the podcast this week, because usually what happens is like we record on a Wednesday and I'm putting the podcast out on Thursday, and it's like the Knicks have made a trade. But the Knicks make their all-in move, trading let me see, make sure I got this right. 5 first, an unprotected pick swap, a second rounder, and Pistons legend Bojan Bogdanovic to the Nets for Noodles Bridges. The Knicks have now completed the Villanova Wildcat Infinity Gauntlet of collecting all 4 Villanova guys with Jalen Brunson, Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, and now Noodles Bridges, which I'm 100% sure that he got the name Noodles at Villanova. I have no proof to back that up, but I just know it in my heart to be true. And then right before we started recording, like literally an hour ago, they signed OG Anunoby to a 5-year deal, bringing him back.
Yeah.
Uh, Looking kind of scary all of a sudden in New York.
That is a much stronger team than they went into this past postseason with. The question for them now is what's happening with Hartenstein. That is the one remaining question.
I think there's 2 big questions. Is you're absolutely right. How do we get Hartenstein back? Or
Yeah.
do we?
Yeah.
The other question is what do you do with Julius Randle?
Literally give him to whoever will take him.
You have his
Okay.
giant ass contract. And I'm going back to the same thing I said in the NBA playoffs is that people were like, wow, look at the Knicks. They got so far without Julius Randle. And I was like, damn, I'd be more impressed if they got this far with Julius Randle because he's a whole ass bum.
Yeah.
Like in the playoffs, this dude is a bum. And I say that as someone who likes Julius Randle because he's led my fantasy basketball league to multiple championships. I've won 4 straight, and he's been on all 4 teams because the way the points work in that league, Julius Randle's basically like a top 5 guy because it only counts positives and doesn't count any negatives. And that's kind of the perfect situation to have Julius Randle. But you got to figure that out. And it's almost like, God, if you could just trade Julius Randle for Hartenstein somehow, that's kind of the perfect move. But I think if they want to be a legitimate contender next year, they have to get Randle off this team.
Yeah, they need to do something about that. But yeah, I mean, there will be teams that are looking to take on a bad contract.
The funny thing about the Knicks too is that they just gave away 5 first, and they still have a first every single year until 2030 because they have so many picks from like trading away Porzingis and like some of the other deals that they've made that they had the ammo to go do this. And they gave away all of their picks, but didn't give away like these extra picks that they have. So, as we're talking, my boy Klingon goes to Portland to play with Scoot Henderson and those guys. I like that pick for Portland. Obviously, I'm on record as saying I really like Klingon.
Yeah, I mean, they can finally get DeAndre Ayton off the floor.
Yeah, that is. I didn't think about that. That is a really interesting pick when the main piece you wanted back in a Dame trade last year was DeAndre Ayton. Like that was the most important thing for you. And now, not even a full year later, you're drafting a center with your first overall pick.
Yeah, that aged like milk in a desert.
They got him in the room for a year and they were just like, oh yeah, fuck this guy. This guy fucking sucks. Let's bring in someone else. But just to wrap up on the Knicks real quick, I think a lot of people are going to look at that and say it's an overpay. So I just wanted to throw out there that one, they had the picks to go do this.
Mm-hmm.
And two, the Celtics won the championship this year. And the Celtics are bringing back the exact same team for next year. And when I look at like, okay, we talked last week about who in the East is possibly going to be able to stop the Celtics. And now you have a team that has Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, and Noodles Bridges as wings to throw at Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Drew Holiday. Like they're going to have whole ass lineups next year where it's like Brunson, 3 of those wings, and a big. And it's going to be extremely switchable. And if you go small ball, like if the Celtics go small ball and put Jason Tatum at center, you may even see all 4 of those wings on the floor at the same time.
Yeah.
That is like a scary proposition to me if I'm the Celtics and I'm like, oh man, I got to figure out how, like, I think the Knicks are like a legitimate threat to them now after these trade, like that trade and that signing.
I mean, we were even talking about it this year. If the Knicks, were able to get out of that series with Indiana, it was really just a matter of like, okay, can the Celtics slow down Jalen Brunson 3 times? Because, I mean, he also is a nightmare matchup for them.
Yeah, it's not a team I would be looking forward to playing next year. I do think there is something to be said about Tibbs, though. And like one of the reasons I think the Knicks didn't make it that far is because he played everybody into the ground, basically. He's like, all of you Wildcat guys, all you Villanova guys are playing 48 minutes a game and you're going to like it. And he literally played Jalen Brunson so much that his hand exploded. It's like, okay, we have to have some more depth next year and we have to not play all these guys 48 minutes a game to beat the goddamn 76ers.
Yeah, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that isn't on Tibbs. Like you do have to manage those rotations and make sure that your guys are able to go. I think it's significantly easier to do that when you have more depth and can actually trust the guys that you need to play in the playoffs.
Well, now you have guys that are going to be fighting for minutes.
Yeah.
Right? Because you have 4 wings, Brunson, assuming that you have a big, whether it's like bringing back Hartenstein, they've been talking about trading Mitchell Robinson so far. So like they kind of got to figure out what that spot's going to look like and see what they get back for Randall. But you're not going to be able to play somebody 48 minutes because that's going to mean that one of the other guys who's going to be important on this team is getting 0 minutes. Right. So I kind of like that situation for someone like OG Anunoby, too, who's been hurt a lot. It's like, okay, we can rest you more because we have other guys who bring what you bring to the table.
Yeah.
Right. Like OG might be better at it as a wing defender than some of these other guys, but like the drop off from playing OG Anunoby to playing like Josh Hart and DDV is not as high as it is from like playing OG and then playing who they were playing this year when everybody was hurt.
Yeah, for sure.
Wemby is tweeting French stuff. Goddamn French are taking over the NBA, Matt. What are we going to do? So many foreign players in this draft. It's crazy.
I mean, the French are doing what they've always done best, colonizing.
I was going to say retreating. Who are there guys in this draft that you like? Like have you I'm not saying like we do a whole my guys episode, but there was one dude I wanted to talk about that the more research I did, I'm kind of like, "Oh, I actually like this guy and I think he's going to be a later pick."
There's no guys that I like really feel strongly about. Uh Dalton Connect is that one guy that I just like feel very comfortable about his ability to come into the league, have his role. He's going to execute it. He's ready to play. And like, yes, he's older, but like, okay, he's 25. He's not 29, right? Like he's going to be able to do that for at least the next 5 years.
Yeah, that's the thing about Connect is like you go in his profile, his draft profile, and his biggest negative is like he's old,
Yep.
but he's got all these positives. Like that's how I felt about Klingon too. Is Klingon on Tankathon, he has his negatives are like free throw percentage and projected NBA 3-point percentage for a 7-3 center. But the positives are like assist to turnover, offensive rating, win shares, turnovers, PER, offensive win shares, offensive box plus minus. Like literally, there's a billion positives. When so many guys in this draft, it's like positive, draft age, negative, everything else. he's young, but he sucks at basketball, and you're like, okay. What there's actually like one guy I like who I think is gonna drop in this draft, and ooh, the Spurs just took Rob Dillingham.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like that for them.
I was thinking that too.
Little like microwave scorer off the bench his first couple years. I think he could be kind of a Jamal Crawfordy guy in his career.
Yeah, I could see that.
He's small as hell though. He weighs the same amount that I do. And he's like 4 inches taller than me. He's 165. But my guy that I like is Nikola Topic. He's
Yeah.
another foreign guy, but 6'7" point guard from Serbia. Played
Mm-hmm.
for Novi Sad, which it's actually like Novosad, but it's spelled like Novi, like Novi, the town that's by us,
Yeah.
SAD. So I like to call it Novi Sad. But he's a big guard, and he actually reminds me a lot of Josh Giddey. If you do the comparison on Tankathon of these two guys, like very similar height, weight, they're kind of crafty passers. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's got the whole bag of passes, and he's really good at scoring once he gets into the paint. The 3-pointers a concern shooting 30% overseas, but he shot 88% from the free throw line,
Yeah.
which like we've talked about this on the pod in the past is that if you show good consistency from the free throw, it shows that you can develop like a repeatable shot. And that
Yeah.
tends to help you with your 3-point development. So, um, like Giddey's a funny guy because I feel like saying like he reminds me of Giddey, people are just like, oh God, like you like him because he reminds you of Giddey. But I think Giddey has like suddenly got kind of underrated in the NBA because of the off court stuff.
No sympathy for the man. But it's hard to imagine how that couldn't have impacted his performance. Like, That's a pretty big deal.
Well, it's just
So
he's Australian too. So like he comes from Australia and like he's kind of a quiet reserve guy. We don't really hear much about him. He goes out last year and becomes the fourth player ever under the age of 21 to average at least 16, 7, and 6.
mhm.
And the other three guys who have done that are Magic Johnson, LeBron James, and Luka Doncic. And like he's never going to be on those guys' levels. Don't get me wrong, but like
Yeah.
you know, I feel like last year before the whole off the court thing happened, it would have been kind of unconscionable to be like, oh yeah, the Thunder are thinking about trading Giddey after
Mhm.
he did that, and then he comes back this year, and it's just like a super weird year for him where he has the whole off court thing and like no sympathy for the guy, like you said, but like he had a consensual relationship with a how old was she? 17-year-old girl, 16, 17, something like
Yeah,
that.
somewhere around there.
She was a minor. So I'm not trying to like compare crimes and stuff, but like it's not like he murdered someone, right? Like I don't know. I can't say this without sounding like a pedophile, right? You
Yep.
can't you can't
We
defend
saw.
Josh Giddey.
Nope. Nope. Just don't. Just don't.
Just don't. But I mean, there are worse things he could have done. Is all I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
But like he gets traded for Caruso the other day. The Thunder flip him for one for Alex Caruso, and the like first reaction to the trade is everybody's like, "Holy shit, that's all they got for Caruso." And that was kind of my gut reaction too. Is I was like, "That's it? That's all you got back for Caruso, who's like a really good role player." Then I started thinking about it, and I was like, "I think this could be a big win-win in this trade because, like, we were talking about distressed assets last week. What asset is more distressed than a 21-year-old guy who did what I just talked about, has some off court stuff, and has like a tough season, and then gets traded for a role player? Like, I think the bigger problem for Giddey, too, was like the ball was in SGA and Jalen Williams' hands a lot more this year.
Hmm.
And so he wasn't getting the ball as much, and he can't do his thing without the ball, really. He's kind of a ball dominant guy who we could argue that, like, if he's going to be dominating the ball for you, is that really a good thing? But Chicago gets a chance to, like, give him the ball. Like, his usage in Chicago is going to be crazy. It's just going to be him and,
Yeah.
like, Kobe White next season, with assuming that Levine and DeMar DeRozan are gone. So like
Yeah.
Chicago can really see what they have in him, and then the Thunder get Caruso, who's like one of the pieces they need to contend next season. So I say all that to say that like when I say Topic is a guy who reminds me of Giddey, I mean that in a positive way. That like there's some good things about Giddey, right? My fear with Giddey is more that like we just saw him in a playoff series where he was literally unplayable because of his shooting. But I
Yeah.
think that Topic's free throw percentage suggests that he might be able to develop like at least a 35 or 36% 3-point shot in the NBA. Just the other problem with him is that he basically needs a completely new ACL. So he's not playing this season. So you're going to draft him. He's going to be on the bench. And it kind of is like the Trey Lance thing in the NFL, where it's like this guy needs reps in the NBA and he's not going to get any for at least a year. And then his first year back, it's going to be recovering from ACL surgery.
You're drafting him now, so like you get to be there and be like kind of in control of that rehab process too. So you can make sure that he is actually like coming back 100%.
To wrap up on the Giddey thing, do we need to do a segment where we power rank felonies on this show, where it's like, okay, these are the top 10 worst felonies power rank that an NBA guy could commit, and I would still want him on my team? And I'm not even saying that I would really want Giddey on my team right now, but like I think for Chicago, it makes sense. So
I get the decision for them. I don't think you're getting a better player in return than Giddey. Like we know what Giddey is capable of. He needs to have learned his lesson, or he's gonna be in serious trouble. Because if he gets in trouble again, in Chicago and doesn't play well, he's going to get eaten alive.
Yeah. It's good. I think it's going to be really good for him to get a fresh start. And
Hmm.
then also, I'm just like, Caruso's kind of the perfect piece for the Thunder right now,
Yeah.
where you could tell things were weird in the locker room with Giddey, not only because of the off the court stuff, but also because he, like, the on the court stuff got weird and they needed
Yeah.
to part ways with him, which is why
Yeah.
he was so cheap and he needed a new start. So I think it's a win win. Uh, it's funny because multiple teams came out, like the Kings, my team, and the Heat both came out, and I guess their GMs were pretty pissed because they felt like they had more competitive packages on the table for Alex Caruso, and Chicago decided to take the Thunder's option of just getting Josh Giddey without like coming back to negotiate with either of those teams. So I guess there's some frustration with Chicago amongst other front offices, but Memphis just took Zach Edey at 9, and
Yeah.
then the Jazz
That
came back and took Cody Williams. Or no, yeah, the Jazz took Cody Williams from Colorado at 10. Both
I
interesting picks. You want to talk
I
about
was
Edey?
not expecting Zach Giddey at 9. However, given what we have said about this draft class, it kind of tracks. He's got to show that, like, in the NBA, he's going to be like athletically able to move with NBA players. That's no small feat at his gigantic size. But like there are certain things that like he's going to be able to do in the NBA. And uh as long as he isn't like too slow of foot like Luke Garza was, um I think he's gonna have a role for a very long time.
Yeah, I talk about this every year in the NBA draft, and it's like literally the Buzelis versus Edey debate here, and like
Yeah.
Buzelis still hasn't been picked. He's still we're at the 11th pick with Chicago,
Yeah.
and we have not seen Buzelis go off the board. But in Edey, he can play.
Yeah.
And there's going to be all sorts of questions about his game and how it will translate to the NBA. But like, I know this guy can play. Where Buzelis, I'm like, tell me what this guy does well, and everybody's kind of like, you like him and Yaha, and you're like, he can do this and he can do that, but he's athletic. And I'm like, okay, especially in this draft where there's so much unknown, that I think Edey can be a really nice like change of pace for a lot of teams, especially someone like Memphis who wants to play super fast and do like a run and gun style with like John Morant and all those guys. You bring Edey in off the bench, and maybe he's like a 15-minute guy, maybe he's like a 20-minute guy, but he gives you a different look. And I just think like he's going to eat against centers in this league,
Yeah.
right? Like put him on the block, throw it into him, let him feast on these guys. If the other team's playing small ball and you have a fucking 7'6" giant on your team who weighs like 300 pounds or whatever he is, like he can play. Like he was not the college player of the year 2 years in a row for no reason. It's not like he's big and that's what he's good at. Like you look at his positives and negatives on his draft profile, it's like what I said about Klingon. It's like, okay, the negative is age, the positive is everything.
Yeah.
He's awesome. He had almost a 40-point PER last season. His offensive rating was 135. Like he can play, and I just think like, in a playoff series during the regular season, everybody wants to talk about shooting threes and how important that is, and like they're running up and down, but you get to points in playoff series where you just need a bucket. And I think that Edey is going to be able to get you a bucket in the NBA. But there's going to be a lot of questions about like, okay, anytime he's on the court, the other team's going to run. You got to see if he can keep up with it. And then you got to see like, how is he moving horizontally? Because
Yep.
teams are 1,000% going to pick on him on the other end. Like
Yeah.
they're going to do the Luka. We're going to drag him out to the 3-point line, make him defend in space and see what he can do. But I don't hate the pick, even though when we were doing March Madness on this podcast, we talked about how he was kind of projected as like a late first, early second guy.
Yep.
And now he's not even just in the lottery, he's all the way up in the top 10.
Yeah. I think it kind of just goes to show how much drafts media does not matter for the way the league actually values players. See, every year in the NFL draft, you saw last year with, was it, I think it was Cam Whitmore that dropped to like 20.
Yeah, Cam Whitmore was like in the 20s. He went to Houston.
Yeah.
Cody Williams goes to the Jazz at 10. Cody Williams, I kind of say the same thing that I say about Alex Sarr, who went second to the Wizards. It's like, you didn't even start. For Alex Sarr, it was in Australia, but for Cody Williams, he was a backup at Colorado last season.
Yeah.
I'm like, you didn't even start for Colorado last season, and now I'm supposed to believe that you're gonna be a successful NBA player. I don't know. That kind of stuff weirds me out, right? And he might need
Yeah.
time to develop, but like that was the old debate with Marvin Williams when he came out of USC. He was picked like top 3 and he didn't even start at UNC. And they're like, oh,
Yeah.
that Carolina team's loaded and it's fine. He just needs to develop. And then he never developed into the type of guy that the NBA wanted him to be. And it's like, oh, yeah, you look at that and it's like, yeah, well, he didn't start in college. What did you expect?
And that's where this stuff gets so dicey to project too, because yeah, I mean, like, why would a freshman have started on that team? Right? Like, there was no reason to expect that to happen. So it's so easy to fall into that trap.
Yeah, if I'm drafting a guy, I guess I know this draft is different, but for like Marvin Williams, if I'm drafting a guy in the top 3, I want a dude who was so good that you couldn't keep him on your bench, even
Yeah.
on that UNC team. It's like this guy is so damn good, he has to start, as opposed to like, yeah, he's good, but we're better with this starting lineup than we are with having him on the floor, and he's a good like 6 man. But
Yeah.
Buzelis just went to Chicago, which again, it seems like they're just going to take a bunch of dudes. So now it's like Giddey, it's Kobe White, it's Buzelis. They're just going to see what they have with a bunch of these guys and give them like super high usage rates and just try to figure it out, I guess. But I'm not a huge fan. I'm not a big fan of Buzelis.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like this class is a lot of splitting hairs, you know? Like, I don't disagree with any of your critiques of him as a prospect. I just, the overall evaluation, like between him and a lot of these other guys, it's like, I mean, like potato, right? It's
Yeah,
like there, none of them are like screaming, pick me.
I guess that's fair. Is that I'm taking my typical logic for a draft class and applying it to a draft class where we probably shouldn't use any logic and just like,
Yeah.
it's a swing,
Well,
right?
in fairness, that is not how these people should be seeing it because this is their fucking job.
Yeah, that's fair. They should really be trying to figure this out. But I feel like Chicago is just going to be bad next year, right? And it's just like,
It's what
okay,
they do.
we're going to suck. But I mean, like more than they've been like a play-in team with DeRozan
Yeah.
and Levine. And now, assuming both those guys are going to be gone,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, we're just going to have a bunch of young pieces and just see what we have in Giddey and White and now Buzelis. And for some reason, I thought they had 2 picks already, but I guess not. But it's like, yeah, I don't know. We'll just like see what we have and then we'll start building from there. And I feel like that's also kind of a nice spot to be in as a GM. It's like, 1, you want to be a contender. 2, you want to be like, we have 0 expectations and we're just starting the build. So now my job begins. And if we suck, totally okay. Don't have to worry about wins and losses and probably be one of the top teams via odds to get the number one pick next year in a draft that has a lot better prospects.
Yeah, I mean that has to be the play for them because like they need to nuke this.
They probably needed to nuke it like a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
They've just been hanging on to this like DeRozan Levine thing for probably too long, and now they're going to lose DeRozan for nothing. And Levine has zero value; he's like a negative asset. So you're going to give stuff away for someone to take on Levine. And it's like, if you would have blown this up when you were supposed to, you probably could have at least gotten something good for DeRozan and maybe not had to like sell Levine at a loss. But that's the hard part, man, is like you build these teams and you have so much hope and then they suck. And I think it's really hard for guys to give up on the dudes that they brought in.
Yeah.
See the Thunder picking at 12, and then we have my team. Yeah, my team brought back Malik Monk the other day, 4-year, 78 million, and a shocking deal that I did not think was going to happen. Malik Monk takes the hometown discount to stay with the Kings. And I love like people now are going back and retrospecting, being like, oh, look at all these idiots that said Malik Monk was worth $100 million. He only got 78. We went over it on the pod last week. Because of the stupid NBA rules and our stupid GM, the Kings were only allowed to offer him 4 for 78. And the fear was he wasn't going to take it and he was going to get 100 million somewhere else. And it's on pretty good authority that there were multiple teams that would have given him 100 for 4. But he takes the hometown discount and he stays because he wants to play with his best friend, De'Aaron Fox. And he also loves it in Sacramento, which someone taking a hometown discount to stay in Sacramento is, I think, the first time that that's ever happened in NBA history and something we should be excited about.
Yeah, no, that is like an original sentence.
Yeah. That's like that subreddit, brand new sentences.
Yep.
But I also like, I don't know what the Kings do now this offseason. Like they missed out on Caruso, and apparently Monty's pretty pissed because he felt like his trade package was a lot better. But you have this package of like Harrison Barnes, Kevin Huerter, a couple picks, and maybe like Davion Mitchell. And all of the notes on the Kings offseason so far have been they want to bring in another piece whose timeline aligns with De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis. And they see this as like a 3 to 6 year window with Fox and Sabonis. And they want to capitalize on it right now. So like the all-in move, I think, is coming. And I think it needs to for them because you're kind of stuck. And Fox is now saying he's not going to sign an extension until he sees how the roster shapes up because he wants them to make a move. So now he's putting pressure on the front office to make a move. The fans are pissed because we were the 3rd seed last year and then we didn't even make the playoffs this year. So you need to make a move. I don't know what that move is for Kevin Huerter, Harrison Barnes, and like some picks and Davion Mitchell. And of fucking course, the Thunder take Nikola Topic. This is like the My Guys episode of the NFL draft where I'm like, these are my guys. And then they all go to like fantastic homes. And I'm going to look super smart because they got drafted to good places. Where if they would have got drafted to shitty places, maybe I would look dumb. We're going to come back to this and say Nikola Topic was one of the best players in this draft. Like they just traded away Giddey and then drafted Giddey. They just replaced him and got Caruso out of it.
Incredible.
Yep. So my team is on the clock, and then after they make their pick, we'll wrap up here and sign off. But looking at who's left, I think I'm rooting for Dalton Connect here. Yeah, I'm looking at who's on the board. Because like I was just saying, they're going to trade away Barnes and Huerter this offseason, and I really think Dalton Connect could fill Kevin Huerter's role really well, especially off the bench. Right? Like you're gonna start Fox, probably Keon Ellis, who we saw at shooting guard be really good defensively the second half of the year. Keegan, whoever you're getting in that trade, probably someone like Kyle Kuzma or Brandon Ingram. and then Domantas Sabonis. And then at the bench, you're looking at like Malik Monk, and then you got to kind of fill that bench spot because right now it's like Monk and Herter and these guys. And Connect is kind of that perfect, like, oh yeah, it's going to be dribble handoffs into threes. It's going to be spot up threes. You're going to have a lot of open looks because Monk and Fox and these guys are going to like drive and kick to you. And it's kind of like the perfect spot for Connect, especially if the Kings are in win now mode. Like, take the guy who's a little bit older, a little bit more ready to play, is kind of my take on this.
Yeah, I think we see so often in playoff games too that like what ends up being the biggest difference maker is having role players that are shot makers. If your role players are hitting shots for you, your odds of winning the game are significantly higher than if they are not, regardless of what else they're doing on the floor. Like, you can't win the game if you don't score points.
Yeah. Yeah, we saw that a lot with the Mavericks in the finals against the Celtics too, where it's like
Yep.
it just got to a point where it's like, okay, if Luke is not shooting this, I don't feel like the ball's going in.
Yeah.
And like you had like Derek Jones Jr. out there who couldn't hit the red side of a barn from three.
Yeah.
So
Well, and when, the role players started shooting a little bit better, then you got Luka going like what, 1 for 21 from three? To the point of that though, like the flip side is that Boston's role players were hitting shots in those games. And like that's why they won those closer games, is because those guys made their shots and the Mavs didn't.
yeah, again, credit to my dad on that one because my dad was like, "You guys always talk about the stars, but I think the role players are going to be really important in this series." And he also said the Celtics were going to win in five. So I bow down to my father's superior basketball knowledge. I have to. It's a
Some
whole. It's the worst thing about the Celtics winning is this is going to be the whole offseason for me.
Hey, something about a broken clock.
It's yeah, a blind squirrel, a broken clock. So what else has happened? Well, the LA Lakers signed JJ Reddick as their new head coach, which my brother-in-law texted me and said, "Hey, Adam, have you applied for the Pistons head coaching job? I hear they're hiring podcasters now." And I was like, "That's fucking fire line from Ray."
Well played.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They showed the
Yeah.
graphic. It was like his coaching experience is like he was a volunteer for fourth graders and now he's the head coach of the LA Lakers, which like to be fair, managing the personalities of fourth graders and managing the personalities of the LA Lakers is probably pretty similar. So he has some good
100%.
experience there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll give him that.
Yeah. Well, and it didn't take long for there to be some off the court drama surrounding him, which obviously there's no evidence around it, but
J-
it's not a good look.
JJ Reddick 100% did that shit.
It's not a good look.
He 100% did that shit. As soon as I saw that, they were like, "Oh, JJ Reddick's camp vehemently denies he did this," and I was like, "You 100% did that back at Duke in the early 2000s."
Yep.
Yeah, you did that. Don't even. Let's see who the Kings pick. You don't even front JJ. Devin Carter, the guard from Providence, point guard from Providence. I don't hate that. I think I would have rather have had Connect here as my gut reaction, but this is another guy who's like negative as draft age, turns the ball over a little bit, but really good defender in college. 94 defensive rating, big pluses on defensive rebounds, blocks, defensive win shares, defensive box plus minus, and gets in the lane and shoots. 38% 3-point shooter, so not bad, but he's a point guard who averaged 8.7 rebounds per game.
Yeah.
In college. How do you even do that?
Well, He's got like a 6'9" wingspan.
Yeah, I might be more excited about this, but he's a 42-inch vertical.
Yeah.
I might be more excited about this pick tomorrow than I am right off the bat. Not not being super familiar with Devin Carter's
Eh,
game, but I've heard his name in Kings circles that I run in as somebody that they would like to have. So it's not shocking.
yeah. I mean, I think when you're leaning one way and then the pick ends up being something else, it takes a little while to like settle in and like really think about what it's gonna look like on the court.
I also think in this draft particularly though, I wouldn't sit here and be like, "Ah, no, not that
Yeah.
guy." Like it's just gonna be who it is, and hopefully it's someone that
Ronnie
can contribute.
James.
Okay, yeah, if it was Bronny James, I might have actually been pissed. Unless tomorrow it was like LeBron James and announces intent to sign with the Sacramento Kings, and then I would do a complete 180 on everything I've ever said about LeBron James. I mean, not really, because
Uh,
I'm not the one on this podcast who's mean to LeBron. That's your guys' job. Usually I'm like, well, he's a good dad. Seems like a good husband. I don't know. He's not doing Josh Giddey shit off the court.
that is fair.
Okay, I'm
I
also
mean,
watching them interview Devin Carter right now. This man has infinite swag. Do you see this?
yeah.
This guy's outfit, infinite swag. Okay, I'm in. I feel like, I was saying they're going to try to trade Herder, uh, and we need someone to like replace Herder's minutes. I
Mhm.
also feel like this is kind of signifying to me that whatever trade they make is going to involve Davion Mitchell because he's right now the defensive backup point guard guy,
Yeah.
and that this is signifying that he's about to be in that trade, and they're trying to replace Davion's minutes, basically,
Yeah, I think that's probably a good call.
with maybe someone who's a little bit more consistent. Because I think that's always been the frustrating thing about Davion is like the jumper is inconsistent, and as much
Yep.
as you gain defensively having him out on the floor, you lose offensively when he's not hitting.
Yeah, well, and if you can get a guy that you believe can play Herder's role and Davion's role at the same time, then yeah, like you're gonna offload those salaries.
Yeah. Also, like Herder's role, not super important, I guess, because Monk is coming off the bench and he's going to be the microwave scorer guy. I mean, I guess we're gonna
Yeah.
have to see what this team looks like going into next season because there's 100% going to be moves. I kind of had my fingers crossed for Bridges for Noodles, but obviously that's not going to happen now. I don't think we were ever going to hit that level of capital going back to somebody unless
No.
we included Keegan Murray in the trade, which seems like it's not on the table. But like Kuzma, Brandon Ingram, still kind of out there. So I don't know that I 100% love one of those moves, but like I do think the big move from the Kings is coming.
Yeah, especially Ingram, like, because Ingram's gonna want his deal, and that's the thing. And I don't want to pay Ingram the money that he's going to command, because someone will pay him. But like, I don't think he's going to yield a return on that level of salary.
I feel like Ingram is the ultimate. I can talk myself into paying this guy, and then I'm just gonna regret it.
Yep.
Like you watch him certain games, and you're like, that's a max player, and then he only plays like 54 games, and only like 20 of those are max player level, and you're like,
Yeah.
okay. Whereas Kyle Kuzma has a very reasonable contract, 23 and a half, 21 and a half, and then 20 for the next 3 years. Like that's much more reasonable than paying Ingram 30 next
Mhm.
season and then having to max him the season after that.
Yeah.
So I could see Kuzma. I just don't know if like we come back next season and it's like Fox, Ellis, Keegan, Kuzma, Sabonis, and then like Malik Monk, Devin Carter, and like Trey Lyles and a couple of these other guys off the bench, like, is that a playoff team in the West? Have we improved enough after like this season to be a playoff team next year? Especially like Memphis is going to have Ja back, and I'm assuming that they're going to be better. The Spurs, I'm assuming, are going to take a leap. Um, oh, speaking of, I know the last thing I wanted to ask you, and then we'll sign off. Uh, Portland just took Bub Carrington,
Yep.
guard from Pittsburgh at 14. So the rumor that came out the other day is that the big domino that everybody's waiting to fall to really kick off the offseason is Paul George, and whether he's going to go back to the Clippers or like what his deal is going to be. One of the team names that popped up in trading for Paul George potentially is the Golden State Warriors, and they would make some kind of deal to acquire him. And I was like, damn, Golden State is another really interesting swing team this offseason where you have these younger assets. You have Kuminga, who showed flashes last season. You have Moses Moody and Podomzensky, and like you have a couple of young assets that are interesting, and you got some picks, and you're not a potentially great team right now, especially with Curry getting older. Those picks can get real valuable real quick, like the future picks.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you either like, do you feel like you owe it to Curry to trade away those young assets and like bring in like a win now piece like Paul George that gives you like 1 or 2 year window to be a playoff team? Or do you take like option 2 where you just keep rebuilding with Curry on the team and you're just like, yeah, we're just going to keep getting young guys and like we'll be a fringe playoff team, but we have Curry, so we sell tickets? Or 3, the option everybody's going to hate, would you consider trading Steph Curry this offseason and launching a complete rebuild in Golden State?
Yeah, I think if you truly feel like you can make a move that makes you a legitimate contender with Curry, then you pull the trigger on that. Guys like Curry, like there's no guarantee you get another one of them for another 20, 30 years. Right? Like not every team gets a top 5 player. So like I think you got to take that swing if you think it's there. If not, I know that it would be a very unpopular decision, but I mean, I think the right move would be to move Curry and start the rebuild. In all likelihood, try and rebuild with Curry keeps you out of position from getting the guys that are going to accelerate the rebuild.
Yeah, I just think the package you could get back for him still right now is going to be significant enough to really help launch your rebuild. And I don't know what it is. I just kind of was thinking about this the other day, is that like guys cross this invisible line in all of sports where it's like, okay, the fans of that team are like, he's never allowed to wear another team's jersey. This is our guy forever.
Mm-hmm.
But some way or another, those guys almost always end up wearing another team's jersey. Whether it's like Peyton Manning going to Denver, Tom Brady going to the Bucks, like, you know, LeBron's been all over the place. There's certain guys who didn't, like Tim Duncan and Kobe Bryant and those guys. And it's very conceivable that Lakeup is just like, I don't care what happens the next couple of years. We're keeping Steph because he's our guy.
Yeah.
But it might be smarter for the future of the team if they do launch the full rebuild right now. But I could also see the argument that like, hey, we owe Steph for everything that he's done for us. So we're going to take one last swing at this and trade, you know, Chris Paul's contract with like Andrew Wiggins' contract and some picks, or Moses Moody to the Clippers. We're going to get Paul George, and then we're going to try to bring in like one other guy and see if we can take like one more swing at this. Even if it doesn't seem like enough on paper to win a championship, it's like, yeah, you kind of owe it to Curry to go after it, or at least put your chips in one more time. But that is it for us. As always, Fouled Out can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. You can hit us up at Gmail, fouledoutsports@gmail.com, and you can watch our videos on TikTok, Fouled Out Sports Podcast. It is a long name, but you can't miss it. We're through 14 picks of the draft. The Heat are on the board at 15, so we'll see what happens there. The elimination bracket for Euro 2024 is set. Some really fun games coming up between like France and Belgium, Romania and the Netherlands. Like, I think that this is going to be a fun tournament. I've been enjoying watching it, especially because it's on at like noon during the workday, and I can just have it on my TV up here in my office. So that's kind of cool. But Matt, any final thoughts before we sign off?
Yeah, I mean, I think as underwhelming as this draft is, I think we still have a lot of mayhem coming in this NBA offseason. It just feels like without the big like draft prospects, no one that anyone's like got to move up for, that teams are going to be more aggressive in other ways.
Yeah, I agree with you. It feels like the draft was just kind of like the first event of the offseason.
Yeah.
And then free agency officially starts a week from Saturday. I think it starts July 6th.
Mm-hmm.
And you have like LeBron James hasn't decided what he's going to do yet. Paul George is obviously a big domino that has to fall. And then there's all sorts of guys like Kevin Durant and Jimmy Butler and all these other dudes who could be traded. So we'll be here to recap that for you guys. We're going to talk about free agency and the trade market next week. And then the week of July 4th, 2 weeks from now, or sorry, the week of July 8th, 2 weeks from now, we're going to launch NBA Top 30. And we'll have our 3 NBA Top 30 podcast to close out July. And then we get into August and it's back to me and Matt doing NFL preseason breakdowns. First full week of August, August 7th, is going to be AFC and NFC North previews. So, like, we're right back into football, buddy.
Yeah. Comes back quick.
Yep. But all right, guys, we will see you soon.
Yep. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Bye,
Bye,
Matt.
Robin.